Hi, Nina here. Our episode this week references suicidal ideation and also discusses substance use at length. If you or someone you love is at risk of harming themselves, or if you just need some help with mental health, you can call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. The number is 800 273 8255, or you can just call the number 988 in the United States. The line is open 24/7, 365 days of the year. In today's episode, I recently had the chance to connect with Ryan. Ryan is a physician based in the Ozarks, and he actually connected to our Chinmaya Niagara community through this podcast, through Live Vedanta itself. He's active in our mentorship community, connecting his life experiences to supporting young people, and most recently joined Vivekji on the Kailash Yatra over the summer. It was really special to sit down with Ryan and just hear a lot more of his story, how he connects to faith, how it shows up in his work, and how he reflects on his relationship with God and connects to service and all that he does. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I enjoyed having it. It's the last episode in our Sea Change series, and very soon we'll be starting season 7 of Live Vedanta. Okay, let's tune in.
So, the executive summary of me, because it's too long, was raised Christian, but was an atheist very young, and told my mother that, which made her cry, and I told my pastor that, which he was like, yeah, right, someday. Went to college, a very depressed, younger child, like I don't know, 9, 10, 11, something around there. I remember being depressed, but never really telling anyone about it. And then college was tough because of just not being socially adept. I don't know, there's no better word. I just wasn't good at making friends. And so that led me down a dark path of wanting to kill myself, but never really thinking about doing it. It was just like one of those things, like I just want to die. And so I finally said something to someone, and I, did the mandatory 3 or 4 days in inpatient. And because I was a young 19, 20-year-old man who thought I knew everything, I pretty much just walked away from that, taking pills for 3 months and never following up with it, moving on with life because I was successful. So then I went to pharmacy school, decided I wanted to go to medical school halfway through pharmacy school after doing a medical mission on the Haitian-Dominican border. And then went to med school, met my now ex-wife, and got married in med school. And then I went and did anesthesiology residency, and then a lot of things fell apart in the marriage, plus some other financial catastrophes. I put that in quotes because, perceived catastrophes versus real catastrophes, but it all came piling on, and my history of depression forever, plus being in anesthesiology residency, doing 100 hours a week, plus all the things that were going on, I truly did get to the point of every single second for months and months and months with a very clear plan of how I was going to end my life. And I laugh about what I'm about to say now, because the only reason I didn't do it, legitimately only reason I didn't do it, was because I had 2 dogs at the time, and they were literally my dogs before the relationship, and I was like, I don't want her to get the dogs. So that was the thing that held me here, thankfully. But then I fell to drugs finally, because I was still suicidal every single day. And I tried drinking, that wasn't helping. I was smoking cannabis, that wasn't helping. So I started doing opiates, and that still finally, none of it was helping. And finally I was just a complete mess, and I was like, okay, now I'm having drug problems too, sweet, especially since I'd never done those before, And so then I ended up, of course, leaving residency and going to rehab, which I ended up going to Hazelden, which was the former Betty Ford Clinic up in Minnesota. And that, to your point of life-changing stuff, I remember going there. It was 3 or 4 days after leaving residency. And this was I was literally a month away from finishing my 3rd year of anesthesiology residency. So it had been 11 years into my, college and training. Actually, no, more than 11, 14 years into college and training when all of a sudden my life fell apart. And I walked in there, and before I said what I said, I was a very arrogant, know-it-all, stereotypical. And I looked up to this guy as a still very atheist man and said, all right, God, I clearly don't got it, because if I did, I wouldn't be here. And, I just kind of broke down and said, I'm going to accept everything and anything that is presented to me here, because these people are supposedly the best. And I hear all these stories from my medical history of people that are saved from this. And they're ones who have been doing this their whole life. I had been doing it for 3 months, but I was still broken. And so very quickly did God show God's self to me throughout those 2 months. And what I didn't know was a lot of the philosophies that were being taught in my inpatient experience were Buddhist and Hindu philosophies. And they were teaching us meditation, and meditation was one of the most powerful things that really started like giving me that, like, what's going on here? There's something that I can't explain, but it feels so real. So then fast forward, just had a lot of amazing things happen in that. And then really it wasn't until, I did a bunch of other things. I ended up, after that, I went to Kenya for 6 months, and I ended up being there during a national physician strike and saw things I couldn't imagine I'd ever see in real life. And I had seen the world well before that. So it's not like I hadn't seen the third world, but it was third world in a national strike in the border of a war zone that really kind of showed me more of the world than I thought there was. And that got me inspired to go into emergency medicine. So then I came back. I worked in the Salt Lake City prison for a little bit as a physician while trying to get back into residency. Then I went to residency in Florida for emergency medicine, where I met my now wife. And then we moved up to the Ozarks, where I've been now for a little over 3.5 years. And during that time, the first 2 years, I was just working to finally work. And I was very much starting to feel the things I had learned and felt in rehab, and also was very much feeling the pain of society through my work.
Yeah.
Because the ER ends up being this like just place where people who are desperate, have no idea where to go or what to do next, go to. And so you end up getting a lot more than just emergency medicine. You get a lot of social and psychological and everything else emergencies. And so it started driving at me real hard. Like, okay, I felt like I've had a third chance at life with my two like inpatient psych suicidal things. And with me kind of finding God with the inpatient thing, I was pretty sure I needed to do more. And so I started seeking out things, and there was a whole sleuth of things that led me to eventually Googling and seeking out, like, I literally typed in Hinduism 101. And so Vivekji's thing came to me, his podcast. And the very first podcast he had on that was talking about Chinmaya and how he had come to the conclusion that all the religions were seeking out the same thing. And part of the reason I ran away from Christianity early on was I was frustrated with a few of the dogmatic things that they spoke about. And I wasn't really mad about anything that Christ said. I was like, he seems like a pretty like nice guy saying great things. Who wouldn't like want to agree with like love your neighbor and all these things? But I didn't like what some of the church had said. And then part of my life path was kind of to prove God didn't exist and that all the religions were wrong. And so in undergrad, I had taken a lot of religious courses. I had even thought about leaving college at one point to go be a theology major, go to theology school just to like learn it all, to prove it wrong. Which ironically, I found out that Chinmaya basically had a very similar story when I was in Mumbai before the Yatra.
Yeah, he was
I
an
learned that
atheist
story.
and journalist for most of his life.
Yeah, his story is like so mine. I'm like, oh gosh. But I came to the same conclusion at some point in my life, whether it was before rehab and just not really wanting to accept God because I was still a little arrogant, or
Mhm.
after rehab. But I had very much come to the conclusion that all of them seemed to be saying the same thing and pointing towards the same ideals with a little cultural context twist within it.
Mm.
And the more I love talking about God now. So the more I talk to people about this as like my argument for why Chinmaya was right is that I'm like, look, like there's no way if I'm God that I'm going to go to just one people and give the word to them and then hope that it spreads. Like
Mhm.
I'm going to go to all these people because I can, because I'm God and I'm limitless and like I can do whatever I want. So I would go to people all around the world and like teach to them the same types of principles through their cultural context. And so to me, like when you go through all the major religions, at least, they all pretty much preach the same thing and they all seem to have like a central figure that kind of says the same thing. So when he said that, I was like, I'm in. So, and then of course, when you listen to Vivekchi, the way he just speaks and is able to give you like the etymology of things really just gets you
Mhm.
hooked.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I feel really much the same way, specifically about Vivekji. It just makes a lot of sense. And I really like both with Swami Chinmayananda and Vivekji, both people who tend to like question things. And then, so I like worked in education for a long time and now just changed over to being a therapist. And I really like the process of taking an idea and like wrestling with it and making it your own. I find that really meaningful. And I find it, at least with the students I've worked with too, they find that meaningful as well. Just not accepting things as they are. And when you're like looking at this like arc of your experience, is there a specific thing that you want to zoom in on? I thought about 20 and what just simply in what you were sharing in that.
Well, so there's two things I do say happened in rehab that really like changed my life.
How long were you there in Minnesota?
2 months.
In 2 months.
Yeah.
Do you remember what a day was like?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I mean that those 2 months are burnt in my mind. They will never go away. Um, so every day, I'm trying to think of a probably the closest is like prison, but not like prison at all. But prison, you don't have a choice in your schedule. And so you slept with, I want to say my room had, I want to say 3 or 4 other gentlemen in it. So, you each had a twin bed. And so you would wake up in the morning, and I want to say you had to be up by like 6 in the morning. It was early enough that I want to say things started at 6 in the morning, I think. So they forced you to get up early, kind of like Vivekshi does. And then essentially it was right away, like you had breakfast, and then there was a group session in the morning for like probably 2 hours, and then you did some sort of like holistic medicine type of thing, something different each day of the week. Like they would teach you meditation, or I forgot the name of this one thing, but all sorts of like Eastern medicine type things for like mindfulness, all those types of things. And then you'd have lunch, and then the afternoon you would have a one-on-one session with either one of the therapists or psychologists, or they're like some of the like spiritual wise leader people. And then in the evening you would have dinner, and then most evenings you would have a guest speaker, someone who's had long time of sobriety, who's now doing great things, who comes to tell you, hey, life isn't over. It actually works if you just stick with it, just take it, step by step. And then in the evening, either the evenings you did have those speakers, or the evenings you didn't, you had some more free times. The evenings you didn't, but you tended to have like 1 or 2 hours before mandatory lights out. And that time was free to use the like two public phones to reach out to the outside world, or watch something on TV, or read something. But you always had mandatory reading that needed to be done. So a lot of times this time was used for reading if you weren't doing it other times. There was always a little bit of time between things to kind of do your reading. And then somewhere in the evening, there was also workout time or free time for workouts. So they had an amazing athletic facility for working out. And the property was on a massive amount of acreage that they had miles upon miles of outdoor trails. And it was on a lake actually, too.
Oh, wow.
So you got to sit by the lake or go running along in the forest. And for me, all of that stuff was amazing. Being removed from social everything, all the technological connections, all the societal connections, and just being removed from it all and saying, hey, let's start thinking about like what the point of life is. What is your purpose? Why are you doing what you've been doing? Just everything. And then to be back in nature, to be re-immersed in nature, was really powerful. And it was so silly at first. I was like, why is it? But what I tell people all the time now is I'm like, look, like the history of humanity was outside. Like it's nuts that we're inside now. All of
Mhm.
us are inside, but almost for 99.9% of humans for the history of the world, we were outside and now we're inside all the time and we're losing that connection. Which, by the way, before I forget it, that reminds me of something I did want to say to you, which is this 25-3 rule that I sent to Vivekji last fall when I went to his marriage retreat. They did a study on it, and it was pretty awesome what they found from a happiness standpoint, like prolonged happiness standpoint, which was you should spend 20 minutes outside at least 3 days a week. So just outside walking in a park, or if you're blessed to have a bunch of acres, just get out and walk. Then the 5 is 5 hours a month be outside. So go to like a state park, like spend a day on one of your weekends a month outside, just enjoying one of the beautiful surroundings that you're by. And then once a year, spend 3 days outside. So like go camping in a national park or somewhere, go camping basically for 3 days. Remove yourself and no technology. You remove yourself from technology during all these times. This is your time to truly just be with your mind and be with nature. And that was what happened to me. I didn't realize, but that's what was happening. And that was part of the spark too, is reconnecting with the real, or not the real, but like the natural world instead of this artificial stuff that we make.
Yeah, totally. Vivek often says, like, in nature, you feel more natural, which feels like a really basic sentiment at face value, but like embedded in that is, I think, what exactly you're sharing.
Yeah, yeah. So that's the usual day.
Hmm.
The two things that were big game changers in my experience was one, the spectrum of humanity was there, right? Rich, especially because it was Betty Ford and now Hazelden, but also poor too. Like they took like the worst cases of the worst cases who have tried all the other smaller ones, regional ones are still failing. That there's like basically this federal funding for these people to be like, all right, send them to the best place now because we got to do that because they're just financially a burden on society. And so there was the spectrum of financial and the spectrum of creed, race, culture, you name it, and also just the spectrum of people that you would expect within your neighborhood, right? Just it didn't matter. Like it was all the way we thought is what it came down to. It was our way of thinking. It was our separation from God and how we thought about things and perceived things that made us lead to bad decisions that eventually got us there. And I realized very quickly, I'm like, wow, despite us all being so different, if you were anyone else that just came and sat and looked at this group of people, you'd be like, you're all different. But all I could see is we were all the same.
Mm.
And that was a big one for me, especially like when Chinmaya said that, we're all one, we're all the same. And I was like, dude, we all are. Like, I was listening to myself and all these people, like I could see myself in them. And even if they had crossed the line I said I never would say or cross, there were lines I crossed that I never thought I would cross. So it's like, what are you talking about? Like, you never know. Like, the walk a mile in someone else's shoes is so impossible. So it really taught me to like not judge at all and realize that we're all the same, just going through this life being presented with these opportunities to make the right decisions. And it's
Mhm.
just a lesson. That's all it is. And the other cool thing I really learned there was my second month, you're still an inpatient, but they let you leave the campus a little bit. And we went to this church where they had an NA meeting. And before the meeting started, there was like this 5, 6, and 7 year old just running around, just, not a care in the world playing. And of course, I'm sitting there thinking my life is over. And then I'm watching them and I'm thinking, when did we lose that? Like, what happened to us all? Because it's very rare that we meet someone that's willing to act like that. And I was like, is that part of our disease in general as society, that we like have convinced each other that you have to quote grow up, when yeah, there's times you have to act like an adult, but maybe that telling people to grow up thing has killed the child in us. And a lot of these wisdom religions, and using my faith that I came up from as an example, Christ all the time talked about the children of God being the most precious because they hadn't been poisoned like us, where we become so jaded and judgmental and skeptical. We just have that beautiful mind as a child that we accept anything and everything we're told. Um, so especially when it comes to the wisdom text, he was trying to say you should accept the text as a child.
So Vivek Ji is teaching right now from Srimad Bhagavatam and Meaningful Mornings, right? And so just even the manifestation of Sri Krishna as a baby, as a child. And I think that's like such a powerful manifestation because there's something like so unguarded and honest in the way a child like moves through the world, and just like unconditionally loving in so many ways. So yeah, I see how different systems we're in kind of train us out of this sort of freeness, curiosity, wonder, and it sucks.
Yeah.
But it's like also cool to see like the ways we can, I don't know, create more ways for us to feel those things again or be in
Yeah.
community with people who value those things too.
Yeah. Yeah. Something I've come to believe recently about kids, especially, is the power that they remind you of that, but also just make you a better person too. I hate the idea that we all have to have kids, but I kind of think maybe we all have to have a kid because of that. There's something about a child that will keep you grounded in a better way of life. They remind you to laugh at yourself. They remind you to take responsibility at times. They remind you to not say things you shouldn't. I mean, everything, right? And sometimes I think, like, I don't have a kid right now and I'm 41, but sometimes I'm like, gosh, like they're just the best of us. And maybe there's a reason why we're capable of producing them, is
Mm.
that they're supposed to be produced by us so that they can make us complete.
Wondering how you describe your relationship to God right now. Like, how do you describe that to people or to yourself, even?
Ah, so I hope this answers it. I believe that our conscience, that voice that tells us what's right, is God slash our accumulated knowledge from all of our previous lives.
Mhm.
And for the longest time in my life, my ego would argue against the conscience about what we should do. And it's very clear now in my life that I listen 100% to that what's right voice. There's no option. And I give it an example to people who are in recovery like this that I think helps people. I say, when you're first in rehab, it's easy to stay clean because there's someone watching you and they're testing you randomly. If you leave, they'll test you randomly. And so it's easy to stay clean during that time. And then another example, because a lot of people also are in jail with it. And even though it's incredibly easy to get drugs in jail, it's amazing. It's mind blowing the stories I could tell about that. Or in prison, I mean. But in prison too, right? Like you have someone watching you and testing you. And then when they get out, they all have this struggle because there's no one watching them or testing them anymore. And I told him what was really easy for me was because I truly had that belief, and truly, I don't believe in God. I know God exists. When I know God exists, there's always someone looking over my shoulder. And in the end, I can sit here and lie to myself. My ego can sit here and convince me not to do something, but God's already telling me what to do inside. And so I got to do it because otherwise I know someday I'm going to have to sit in front of some sort of judgment about why didn't you do what you knew was right? And I just can't do that. So my relationship with God is that it's 100%. That's the only point. Like to me, I am a disciple. I try to go literally everywhere I go, I talk about God. I talk about God at work. I talk about God when I'm at service. I talk about God when you have friends and family over. My wife is always like, my God, Ryan, please stop. I'm not kidding. Like, I got to watch it. Someday she might leave me just because she's like, you are getting out of control. No, I mean it is nice. It is the beauty of being with people of like mind. But I was at the soup kitchen this morning. I was talking with one of the guys there, and I he had kind of said something to the extent of wanting to stay within the group, and I said, well, remember that, and I quoted Chinmaya, the Chinmaya mission of, maximum happiness, maximum people, maximum time. So it's great to be around the people that want to talk about God, but you got to be talking about God with everyone
Yeah.
because that's the point. So this is fun, but I also have to do it with everyone, even if I know they're going to ignore me.
Is there anything, when you look back at the Ryan that was just stepping into the space of rehab at that time in this inpatient program, is there anything that you would tell him, the Ryan from now, looking at the Ryan from the past?
I would say yes, but I also don't believe in any regrets because I wouldn't be exactly who I am if I didn't go exactly through what I went through.
Mm,
And I think personally, anyone who doesn't already have strong faith, who doesn't like literally wouldn't bear a cross for their faith, is going to require a rock bottom. I don't think there's any other way. And there's a beautiful saying I learned in rehab, which was the teacher will arrive when the student is ready.
mm.
And so would I tell him a lot of things? Yeah, but also like no, because otherwise I wouldn't be here. And I think I would have had to gone through I would have had to have gone through it that way because I know who I was. I was so arrogant. I was such a know-it-all because God blessed me with just enough of everything to think I knew everything. And then I realized I knew nothing.
No, that's such a solid and valid answer. I'm just reflecting on a lot of the people who listen to Live Vedanta are of South Asian origin. They have like a lot of misperceptions of around what like substance use looks like, what it
Hmm.
means, who it
Hmm.
happens to. I'm saying
Yeah.
that in air quotes. Just to like break that open a little bit. What are some of the common misunderstandings that you bump into as someone who's been on both sides of the coin of recovery, as a provider, as someone who's experienced, as someone who talks to people about it? Like, and especially for people who are really scared to talk about substance use, right? Like, that's also another thing. I'm thinking of the community that might be listening. We don't like talking about it because it's scary and it's bad and it's embarrassing and, all of those things. So,
It's not just your community, it's everyone's community. You know, oh my gosh, first you gave me goosebumps. Yes, because yes, yes, yes. Uh, Pre-rehab Ryan all I thought as a physician was what I was taught, which is totally wrong, 100% wrong. But it was this idea of they're just addicted personalities. They have addiction problems because there's other people that use a lot of these substances and aren't addicted. So they have an addiction problem. They must have an addicted personality. What I've come to realize and what most people realize now, including most of the medical community, is that it's not really an addicted personality. It's people who have serious depression, serious anxiety, plus a lot of the other mental health things like schizoaffective, schizophrenia, you name it. There's a lot of serious mental health problems that, you know, drives them to drugs out, not out of sadness, which most addiction is. Most addicts, most people on the street, in my experience and what from the data that I've read, is people are sad. And this is their way of getting through each day without killing themselves. They numb themselves up to deal with the society they're in, which that they don't understand. That makes no sense to them. And honestly, like, it makes no sense to me either. Like, I just, I have such a hard time with society now that I know God, and now that I read, I read the Bible every day, but I also do meaningful mornings every day because I love listening to more than one wisdom text, mostly because I know how the game of telephone worked. And so I'm not sure if all these books are, literally word for word correct, but I know the themes are right. So I like to just hear multiple ways at it to try to do this the right way. Oh shoot, where were we at? Why did I go there? I do this sometimes. I'm getting old.
No, I was just, because you've seen both sides of the coin when
Yeah.
it
Oh
comes to
yeah.
substance use, and like it's just really taboo, and
Yeah.
like you said, not just in the Indian community and across a lot of communities. Like, what would
Yeah.
you say to that, or what do you think people should know?
Yeah. I would say number one, it's, I think oftentimes people running from their feelings. And my personal belief when it comes to sadness, depression, is that it's really a expression of how we're feeling about our faith and our purpose and why we're here and what the point of life is.
Mm.
And when we have those answers, I always say, what's there to worry about? Like when you kind of have even a gist of an idea, because I don't know exactly, obviously, I'm not going to be blasphemous about it, but I think I get the gist of the point. And the fact that I know that there is God just like changed my life, because before I was the same person as those people. Even though I didn't have a drug problem, I thought the same way as them my whole life. That's why I was depressed. That's why I was sad. And if I was in a slightly different life setup, I probably would have been a drug addict, like I probably would have. And it's just this purposelessness. So if you see someone or know someone who's taking a bunch of prescription pills, and I mean this as a former pharmacist and doctor, like, I think way too many people are on benzodiazepines and pain medications. And I'm not going to say they shouldn't be on like their SSRIs and things like that, but these medicines aren't magic pills. Like, therapy is a million times better. Just talking about it is a million times better. And it's not my opinion. The data shows that therapy is a million times better than the medicine. But we got people that think that these pills that can numb their feelings or numb their pain, and some of that may be physical, but a lot of it's probably mental manifestation of pain too, which is real to them. It's not that it's not real, but they're numbing it up because of stuff that they don't want to deal with, or stuff that they can't understand or comprehend, which tends to be this purpose of life question. What I will say is, when you meet people who are in recovery, who are like true recovery, they all sound like me. They're all nuts. We're all just like, God, yeah, life's great, woohoo. And people are like, what's wrong with you? Like, shouldn't you be depressed or something? No, I already did that, man. I found God. And they're like, oh, God, you're one of those people. I'm like, yeah.
No, I'm like, yeah, actually, that I think that's what you just described is totally true. Well, I don't think you're nuts. I'm just thinking like I've heard that same level of
Yeah.
enthusiasm from folks who like in my life who are sober in different ways or have had an experience of rehab in specific ways. No, I wanted to ask you about service and your relationship to
Oh yeah.
service. It sounds like it's a really meaningful part of your life. I heard you mention a little bit of the soup kitchen. Is that how it shows up in your life right now, or do you see it as like a through line in your life work at the moment?
If money didn't matter, that's all I'd do. Um, and I literally, so some people think that I have money and I laugh because I don't, because I literally worked enough to pay my credit, like monthly credit cards, and like barely put enough into like for that rainy day fund. And they don't work anymore so that I can do service. So every Monday and Tuesday, I shouldn't say that. Most Mondays and Tuesdays, I'm at the soup kitchen. I'm really excited about something that went through while I was at Kailasha. I'm going to finally start working at the juvenile detention center every Friday. So I've like blocked out my schedule for the foreseeable future. Every Friday I'm going to be there. I'm so excited to like start working with like these youth who are hopefully going to get a second chance at life, and hopefully I can help try to guide them to a way that doesn't get them back into a place like they're at right now. Otherwise, my service, I feel like I perform service all the time. I go to work and get paid for my service, honestly, because I go to work and treat it like it's a pure privilege. I didn't used to, but there was a change about a year and a half ago where I think it was actually something Vivek said that I was like, yeah, you have to, no matter what, feel blessed that you get to do this. And so I go in and being in the Bible Belt is pretty awesome because I can actually talk about God with most of my patients, like legitimately. So there's a lot of service that happens at work too. It's just that I get paid for it. But I try to turn that around and give it as much as I possibly can again, so that there's this saying from Jesus. I
Mhm.
know we're not Jesus freaks here, but I do love. There's this. No, I know. No, that's what I love about Chinmaya, because they accept every religion. That's why I literally love Chinmaya Mission. He has this saying in one of the Gospels that talks about the fact that basically it's impossible to get into heaven if you're rich,
Mhm.
because then you're not giving enough. Because why do you need it all? That's greed. And so I really like, even if I do make like work a little extra, like that's the month we give more then, so so that's my service.
I'm really resonating hard with that reframe because I often think about like what does it mean to divest from the rat race? And when I hear you talk about how you've structured your week, so you're like one orienting with the mindset of service, but like also divesting like from accruing for the sake of accruing.
I I'm obviously blessed to have a position in life where I could potentially do it until I die, which is kind of my plan anyways. I always want to be either working as a physician or teaching future physicians, but not as much as I am right now, and I'm not doing it that much already. But uh, so I always am going to do a little bit. So I just really think about money as like whatever. Like I don't need to put a pile of it in an account somewhere because I stay active. And even if I wasn't working as a physician, honestly, like we're blessed to have like 17 and a half acres, and I'm working the land nonstop. And I'm like, I love that so much that I tell people all the time, like, dude, I just want to start like a landscaping company and go work the land for like my retirement gig. I just can't imagine sitting around. So there'll always be money, there'll always be food, there'll always be shelter. Like to hoard this money when other people need it is nuts to me. So
What do you notice about your soup kitchen community? What do you notice about yourself when you're in that space? What do you notice about the people around you?
we get to talk about God. It's the
Yeah.
best part. I mean, because they're literally most of the people are in recovery and most of them are truly homeless. So they're they're just not like us. They've been pushed aside, ignored, spit on, whatever, for so long that they don't care what you think about them. And so they're willing to have a conversation that you might look at them and be like, oh, they don't care. And so it turns out to always be these beautiful conversations because you learn something incredible every time. So they're the best people. And all people are the best people, but they really are just gems. And I do mean that. I know some religions believe that like some people can't be saved, but I'm kind of the opinion I think we're all going to be able to be saved. And if we're going to run out, I at least want to say one thing to that point. When I really started finding God, oh gosh, I hope he won't listen to this, so whatever. My youngest brother is 10 years younger than me, and we had this conversation at some point where he says he's agnostic, but he sure sounds atheist. And we had this conversation about like, what would it take for you to see to believe in God? And I just went down this like rabbit hole of like miraculous things. And everything he came back with was, no matter what you give me, at some point technology will be able to reproduce that. And so I'll just think it's like the leading edge tech. And I'm like, so whatever. But that got me to talking to my best friend from high school who went through some absolute tragedies a couple of years ago, like lost a child at 28 days. And he went back to like full force faith and became this wonderful person because of it. And I asked him, I was like crying to him. I'm like, what am I going to do? Like my brother, like he's not going to, he's going to go to hell or whatever. And he like looked at me and he's like, Ryan, we all find God at the end. Like, and when I thought of it, I'm like, yeah, it would take a pretty brass ego to like on your deathbed still be like, no. Like most people in my experience, because I've unfortunately been around way too much death, but it's also made me realize that that's just part of life, is most people do in the end kind of have this like, I'm sorry, God, and feel very settled by that. And from most of the readings that I've come across from all those different wisdom texts, that's all it takes, is even in the end, as long as you believe, right? Now, you don't get a pass. You don't get to believe and then just like do terrible things your whole life and then be like, sorry. But if you're one of those true, like legitimate, I'm just questioning, I'm not sure's, and then in the end, you're still like, I'm sorry, I do believe, please forgive me type of thing. And if you've lived a good life otherwise, I think those people will go to whatever the next is. And I think most people, and there's a few that probably won't, but I think most people get there.
And it kind of is like such a Vedantic mindset. Like if everything is one, like if we are all one and someone quote unquote isn't saved, then none of us are. So if we're assuming some of us are and we're all one, we have to. Like we're all in it together.
I have a parallel saying that I say, which is in regards to reincarnation. When people ask me, well, why do you think that system exists? I'm like, well, have you ever met a human being that's perfect? And every person I've ever met says no. I'm like, well, if the definition of heaven is perfect, and the definition of perfect means there can be no imperfections, then what better system than to allow these souls to come back again and again and again to get a lifetime of lessons to eventually be like God and join with the perfection.
I love that. Thank you for doing this. Yeah, I really appreciate it. It's just so nice to meet you.
You too. Thank you. Keep doing what you're doing. Testify whenever you can.
If you enjoyed what you heard or want to learn more, share this episode with a friend or find us online at facebook.com/cmniagara. For those on the journey of self-development, Chinmaya Mission Niagara provides a community forum for seekers to listen, reflect, and contemplate. This podcast is produced by the Young Adults of Chinmaya Mission, an international nonprofit working to transform individuals through the knowledge of Vedanta. Until next time, inspire, love, be.